Good morning, friends. I am here once again to discuss about what we were discussing yesterday. I started with the new chapter of political science, the first chapter, The World Since 1991. So let us have a quick revision what we studied yesterday. So we discussed about the background, the scenario of the world before 1991. I discussed with you all about the First World War, that the First World War began in the year 1914 and it went till 1918. During this time, there were two powers, Allied powers and Central powers. Allied power consisted of France, Britain, UK, Canada, India, and others, while Central powers consisted of Germany, Bulgaria, Austria, Hungary, Ottoman Empire. These were the countries under the Central powers, and here Allied powers defeated the Central powers, and there were huge loss, and it was the First World War, so there was a huge loss lives and properties. So it was decided to have an organization that would prevent the outbreak of the Second World War, that would maintain the world peace, and so the countries decided to have such an organization, and the League of Nations was established on 10th January 1920 with an aim to maintain the world peace and to prevent the outbreak of the Second World War. But unfortunately it failed, and we entered into the another stage of war, that was the Second World War, and there was the outbreak of the Second World War in the year 1939, and this war it went till 1945. During the Second World War, what happened? Allied powers defeated the Axis powers, and Allied powers consisted of the major powers, that is USA, UK, USSR, China, Poland. These countries were there under the Allied powers, and since Allied power defeated the Axis power, now there were the Allied powers only, and here two major powers, that is USA and USSR, emerged as a superpower, and the entire world was divided into two, and there was a division of Europe into East Europe and the West Europe, and there started Cold War between these two countries, between USSR and USA. So the Second World War came to an end in the year 1945, and the period that started after 1945 came to be known as Cold War. Till here we studied yesterday. Now I'll proceed further to discuss about the Cold War, what the Cold War is. As I said, okay, so what is Cold War? As I said that after the Second World War, two countries emerged as a superpower, that is USA and USSR. And when these two countries emerged as a superpower, the entire country, the entire Europe, the entire world was divided into two parts. Have a look on this map. This is the map of Europe. Entire Europe was divided into two, Western and Eastern bloc. Now the countries you can see in blue are the countries that were dominated by United States of America, while the countries that are there in red were dominated by USSR. So the red ones is Eastern Bloc and the blue one is Western Bloc under the domination of United States of America. Now the countries under blue, the countries in blue color are Italy, Spain, England, France, Turkey, Greece, West Germany, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium. So these countries are under the control of United States of America. United States of America dominated these countries, and these countries followed the ideology of United States of America. These countries together they formed military alliance, and the name of this military alliance was NATO, while the countries in red were dominated by USSR. It is known as Eastern Bloc, and it was under the control of USSR, and these countries were Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. These were the countries which were under the control of USSR, and they were known as Eastern Bloc. Even they formed their own military alliance, and the name of the military alliance was Warsaw Pact. As I said, there were two powers, two superpowers. So there existed a Cold War between these two countries. Now let us see what the Cold War is. Now, USA, it followed the ideology of democracy and capitalism. On the other hand, USSR followed the ideology of communism. Now, there was ideological difference between these two countries. Now, there was ideological hatred among these two countries. So, what the Cold War is? So, Cold War indicates the state of constant conflict, suspicion, mistrust, hostility, and a sense of jealousy without a direct armed confrontation between the two factions. Now, Cold War was what? It was the state of tension, state of hostility. It was ideological hatred against each other. Ideological hatred means that the ideology that was followed by USA, as I said, was capitalism, was democracy, while the ideology that was followed by USSR was the ideology of communism. Now, there was a ideological hatred. Why? Because USA wanted that its ideology should be followed in the entire world, and it wanted to be number one. On the other hand, USSR, that followed the ideology of communism, it wanted its ideology to be followed in different parts of the world. So there existed a competition between these two countries. Both of them wanted to be number one. So they started competing with each other in every field, be it a military, economic, or cultural field. So there was an ideological hatred among them. Like in your class, what happens? There are rankers in your class: first ranker, second ranker. Second ranker always, is in the competition with the first one, and the first one with the second one. Second one to want to excel in his next exam. Even he always want to be number one. So there exists a Cold War between first and the second ranker. Okay, second ranker wanted to be number one in his next exam. So there is always a competition between the first and the second ranker. First ranker always want to be the first ranker in his class, right? So there exists a competition between these two students always in your class. You must have seen that. So similarly, there existed a competition between USA and USSR. Both of them wanted to be number one in the world. So they were in the competition in every field, be it military, economic, or cultural field. During this Cold War, there was absence of armed confrontation. It means that they were in war, they were having a sense of jealousy, hostility, but there was absence of armed struggle. There was no armed struggle, but that's why it is known as it was a war, but a Cold War, not an actual war, not a hot war, right? Why not a hot war or a actual war? Because there were absence of armed struggle. Armed struggle was not there, but it was just a sense of hostility, tension, and ideological hatred. That's why we call it as a Cold War, but not an actual war or a hot war. So in this Cold War, the entire world was divided into two blocks. Okay, there were two poles. So that time international system was known as the system of bipolar. That system was known as bipolarity. Bi means two, polarity means pole. So in the world there were two poles, there were two powers, and half the countries were following USA, some of the countries were following USSR, so the entire world was divided into two